I'm in Pall Mall in southwest London to interview Lord Bhattacharyya, chairman of Warwick Manufacturing Group. Now, through WMG and Warwick University, there have been more investments made at this organisation as a university than in any other in the UK, specifically in engineering centres, research centres and technology. And the sector that they really focus on is automotive, with WMG's relationship to Jaguar Land Rover. I'll be talking to Lord Bhattacharyya about Brexit and the outcome of the referendum, also about his views on Indian foreign direct investment, all the different investments at Warwick Manufacturing Group, and about well, let's hope, Britain's new industrial strategy.
MTDCNC, bringing you the latest engineering news via video media.
Lord Bhattacharyya, Britain's decision to leave the European Union. Now, you were a firm Remainer, but the outcome of that referendum was different. We've decided to leave the EU. Since then, there have been several economic indicators that that was perhaps the wrong decision, because apart from anything, manufacturing activity has contracted at its fastest pace for 3 years. But in the round, do you see some positives as well as negatives from the Brexit decision?
Well, we have to accept what has happened in the country. That's the wish of the people. We are a democratic country and we have to accept that. But the world is much bigger than Europe. What we have to look at is how do we exploit the other markets, which we, to some extent, for various reasons, we concentrated a lot on Europe. We have to now look at the whole world. I mean, from the Commonwealth, China, Japan, Korea. We used to talk about the Pacific Rim countries, Australia, America. So it's a much bigger scenario, and hence we can capture them much more because we can concentrate on them rather than just concentrating on Europe. Europe, of course, was very important to us. It's our neighbor, and we work together on all sorts of things. But what's happened has happened. We should look forward to developing links with other countries. And I'm pretty sure in 3-5 years' time, we will be in a much better position than what we are in today.
Now, you have very strong links to India. From an Indian perspective, in terms of foreign direct investment into the UK, does it really matter what's happened with Britain's decision to leave the European Union, and is it in fact advantageous for Indian investment?
Well, it's always good to have Europe. But, most of the investment that's taken place here, the Indian investment, we are, I suppose, the largest inward investor in UK today. I mean, WMG and me, we have brought in many, many big companies. And I think the last figure that both, one of the companies that I brought in here, like Tata's, have evaluated there are nearly 400,000 people employed directly or indirectly because of that investment. And I still remember when I was asking them to come and invest in UK, there was a lot of hesitancy because UK was a smaller market. But there is a lot of love of UK in India. And the same thing goes for China. There is a lot of understanding and of UK, brilliant scientific base, good universities, good cities, and some of the companies that are surviving now, although it's below just about 10% of GDP. Bear this in mind, it's today when all other countries have at the same time industrialized. 10% is not bad. And they are the cream la creme, Rolls-Royce, British Aerospace, many pharmaceutical companies, then Jaguar Land Rover, the most profitable company in this country, and the investment of Tata Steel, Tata Consultancy Services, and many other companies, Bharat Forge, all done by various companies is producing for them enormous rewards. And so I think the inward investment will continue, hopefully, and it hasn't had that much of an adverse effect as yet today.
You mentioned Tata Steel. Obviously, you've got connections to Tata Group, and in the aftermath of Brexit, there was some positive, some silver lining that in Port Talbot, I understand that some of the orders for the steel, the cast steel there, were increasing because of the effects on the value of the pound. Do you see that weakening pound being a long-term consequence of the decision, and do you think that could be the salvation or one of the reasons why we can save the UK steel industry?
Look, Tata Steel, I brought them here. And the reason I brought them here, because steel is a strategic industry, and in Britain, which was a great manufacturing nation, and still a great manufacturing nation, we needed steel. The reason why Tata Steel was in trouble, because over the last 30 years, there has been no investment. I mean, in fact, if you look at investment in British manufacturing, has until now been pretty poor, except a few industries. So, and that made them uncompetitive, including high energy costs. But what really, in the end, made them decide what they had decided earlier on was huge import of steel that was taking place in this country. And we couldn't do anything to combat it. That's number one. But anyway, that's past. Now, Tatas have decided to stay here. I asked them and in fact developed a strategy for them to stay here in this country. And in the short to medium term, there'll be a lot of work being done both by the government and Tatas to make sure they remain here as a profitable business so that they can invest here more, but in maybe specialized steels and other things.
So no longer big blast furnaces, more like the
there will be
recycling through the...
but there will be blast furnaces.
Electrolysis.
The blast furnaces will still be there because some of the steels that are being made requires blast furnace. And we have agreed, Tatas have agreed with the British government that we will keep one of the blast furnaces open in the corporate plan that the Tatas have provided to the government. But the Tatas then will also have maybe partners. There's a lot of talk and discussions taking place with Thyssen in Germany, and if some of the problems in steel is sorted out, especially with the unions and pension funds, then I have no doubt whatsoever steel will have a very successful business in this country.
Moving on to Warwick Manufacturing Group. It's one of your main projects in the UK, and the list of research centres, manufacturing centres and investments is quite impressive, really. There's the National Automotive Innovation Centre, the Advanced Propulsion Centre, but perhaps I could ask you to summarise for the viewers the main areas of investment and also what the strategy is. Is it to create a sort of automotive hub of intelligence and research for the UK?
Well, I think I want to broaden it to manufacturing hub and research, with special emphasis in automotive, because that's where the growth is coming from in the short to medium term. And having enticed Tata to come and buy JLR, it's in my interest to make sure that JLR succeeds well. So therefore, that goes without saying. Furthermore, I mean, manufacturing, automotive manufacturing is still one of the biggest manufacturing sectors in this country. We have to have a strategy for that. We have to make sure that there is R&D that takes place, there's skills that we are developing for that, there's investment that is required in that, you see. So that is one of the reasons why right from schools, where we have the university technology colleges, at the age of 14, which we bring them here, so that youngsters can join manufacturing industry. Secondly, if you then take into account apprenticeships, we are starting one of the biggest, if not the biggest, apprenticeship school in UK.
Really?
Jointly with the automotive sector. But there are other companies from other sectors have also joined, and they will all be migrating, and we will have a path for them to join universities whilst working in the companies and getting their degrees. And we need to do that in order for them to get the sort of training that they require for future manufacturing industry. And we then took the other step whereby we said we want to create employment in Coventry. We want to make Coventry the motor city of UK. And now Coventry has actually decided to call itself the motor city. The city has decided to do that, and we have already created about 10,000 employment in the city by increasing the footprint of JLR's R&D activities and some manufacturing activities there. We are now discussing the second stage of producing batteries, electric batteries there, or one of our big intellectual properties is in electric batteries, and it's we are discussing to develop a prototype battery factory there prior to making a full-scale battery plant, so that we could make the electric cars. If you don't have a battery plant, you can't do electric cars because they're so heavy. You have to have a manufacturing plant for batteries. So it's all thought through. It's not random.
Sure.
And so in order to do that, of course, we had to do a lot of work in battery development and battery manufacturing.
This is the Energy Innovation Centre, is it?
Yes, it's the Energy Innovation Centre. Then we have the new type of products that are coming in the future requires different methods of design and fabrication. You can't have a normal car and just attach an electric battery there. We have to completely rethink about the design of cars so that it's much more lightweight, and at the same time it has to satisfy the European regulations. So the design of cars would be different. So therefore there will be different materials, there will be different methods of fabrication, and if new factory, say, producing these things is not recognizable compared to what it is today, it's completely different. So unless you are concentrating on a particular product, then there is no point in doing research, because in that was the purpose of doing research. You have to develop a product. Now, while developing that product, that doesn't mean other companies can't use the same thing. The other, not just car companies, but other suppliers and other small and medium-sized companies can use the same technology. So we help them as well, because I have a very, very big SME team there, which is going to very many SMEs in the country, and especially in the West Midlands, trying to renew them, trying to advise them, all free of charge. We don't do anything just for the sake of money. Now, then comes the steel center, because if you are going to develop the new type of thin steels, coated steels, etc., you have to know how to fabricate it. You have to know how to develop it for the suppliers. You have to know how to use them, how to coat it differently so that it can be fabricated much more easily than today. You might have to combine new types of steels with composites, with aluminium, and sometimes polymer reinforcement. So how do you do that? It's not just doing in a lab scale. Nobody will believe you. You have to do it properly on a particular product. So that is the reason when I develop these things, there is a purpose for it. It isn't, see, what happens, most companies will say, well, university research, it's fine, they publish papers, etc. What have they contributed to the economy? Where is the job creation? Where is the impact? And right from day one, when I started Warwick Manufacturing Group, My purpose and my mission was to create an impact where job creation and the economic impact that it will generate to a region or to a country will be such that it is going to be substantial. That was the purpose.
Tell me about the National Automotive Innovation Centre specifically. What is that? How much investment? What will it achieve?
Well, the total investment when it is complete will be about £1 billion, out of which the building alone is about £300 million. Okay, and the reason is that if you want to do something, you have to actually produce it, test it, and it'll be the state-of-the-art facilities. Currently, what happens is everybody says, look at what's happening in Germany, look at what happens in America. I can tell you this, once it's ready, it will be the best in the world.
Really?
And we are going to do the state-of-the-art research there so that it can migrate straight to the companies from there. There's no point just talking about it, you have to do it. So when we were designing cars, people said, okay, you're doing it in the lab, etc. There is a technology transfer to the company. But do you really know how to design cars? Do you really know how to design products with all the regulations that are there? It's not just designing, can you make it? Can you make it economically? So unless you have a facility like that, people will not believe it.
Yeah. And specific on the technologies being developed in the centre, the NAIC, what will happen in the building? Are you looking at ways of scaling up the manufacture of core parts for car makers? And give me an
and
example
also
of that.
designing new types of cars. I mean, if you're going to design lightweight cars, if you're the car
So
of the
design
future,
for manufacturability.
Yeah, and the design of cars in the future will be totally different, because if it has got to be very lightweight, whether it's hybrid, whether it's electric or conventional powertrain, it has still got to be very, very lightweight. If you look at the cars today, very little has changed from what it was originally. Okay, of course there is new materials, of course there is new technology, computer-aided design techniques, analysis techniques are all there, 3D modeling, etc. there, but nothing has fundamentally changed. But it has to change, because we are now at the crossroads where we are talking about electric, where we're talking hybrids, and CO2 is a big issue wherever you go. And for Britain to be competitive and Britain to export such things, we have to be right at the frontier of that technology, and that's what we were doing in the past.
A quick word on the intelligent vehicle demonstrator, and will that demonstrator develop into its own intelligent vehicle centre for drivers?
Yes. The reason why I've spent a lot of money on that and given it a critical mass, and of course the research councils have funded some as well there.
Sorry, this is for driverless car technology.
Driverless, we call it autonomous cars. I mean, driverless cars is quite often a myth. In that sense, we have to call it autonomous cars, whereby a driver will get, various signals for the driver to operate in a safety critical sense, and at the same time have lots and lots of intelligence in the car. For example, if you're traveling in a car, quite often you might get tired and you drive and you have accidents. That's one extreme. The other extreme could be you want to drive on a motorway from A to B, and you want to be able to have some autonomous driving taking place with signals coming out either from the infrastructure or from the car itself, which assists the driver. So driverless cars, of course some of them will be there, but in the next 30, 40 years, there's a lot of migration to take place if it ever have to come in as a commercial venture.
Now, last question. There's been a lot of change in government in the last 6 weeks, really, since the EU referendum decision. New Prime Minister, new cabinet, and one of the new jobs appointed, Greg Clark, his job title now is Business Secretary of State for Business, Innovation Skills and Industrial Strategy. This is a new term for a business minister. Do you recognise the industrial strategy part of that title? Do you think we'll see one, frankly, after several attempts? And what shape do you think that will be?
But you know, this time, industrial strategy, right on the very first day that the Prime Minister became the Prime Minister, she brought in industrial strategy at the heart of government. Okay? The Prime Minister's title is also industrial strategy. For the first time, Britain is a small country, and we cannot do patchwork. We have to make sure that the productivity is the same, improve substantially. If not, we are not going to be competitive. And that depends on a host of things. Infrastructure, skills, energy, you know, and helping manufacturing industry. It's not just by saying, hang on, we'll give you lots of money. But what's important is if the industrial strategy is there for a company to work with the skill base, with the infrastructure, with helping on exports, helping on imports, and a host of things like that, it can only be the best for the country. Until now, this hasn't happened because on one hand, they talk about Northern Powerhouse, they talk about Midlands Energy, Midlands Engine, and various other things. You see, you have to understand they are all piecemeal.
Yes.
What you need to do is for the country as a whole, not just dependent on London, but the country as a whole. And you know, it's not rocket science. If the government puts its mind together, this can be achieved relatively quickly.
But you've got confidence that it will be?
I'm quite confident that it will be. And I suggest you look at some of my debates in Parliament. Why I'm so confident.
I'll look that up, thank you. The very last question. Many of the audience for MTDCNC are precision engineering companies, often relatively small companies, and they're working with machine tools, making precision components within a supply chain. To those smaller operators, SMEs, perhaps with up to 20 staff, what sort of advice can you give them about the way British manufacturing is going? The digital revolution, the industrial strategy, Industry 4.0, do you think it's all too blue sky for these people? And what can they do to keep pace of the change?
Of course, to a lot of people it'll all be blue sky. Okay? But in reality, majority of them are quite practical. I mean, the way we articulate it, we make it much more difficult for them to understand. It's very simple. It is in large investment. You need to keep the skill base. You need to keep the supply base. The market pull has to help them as well. And if you can do that, then I'm pretty sure our small and medium-sized companies, small companies, are as good as any in the world.
But an SME of, say, 10 people in Wolverhampton could benefit from the WMG apprenticeship school that you're referring to? Yeah, you're supplying people for small firms.
In fact, there's a big contingent now coming in from the small companies, being helped by the big companies. I was a graduate apprentice myself. When I was at Lucas Industries doing my graduate apprenticeship after my degree, Lucas took more people as apprentices than they required. And a lot of them went to the small and medium-sized companies. That was the responsibility that the big companies took. Now that we have levy system, the bigger companies can help the small companies like they did during my time as an apprentice.
Good. Well, Lord Bhattacharyya, thank you very much.
Thank you.